Galw'r cynulliad cenedlaethol I drefn. Yr eitem gyntaf ar yn agenda'r prynawn yma yw cwestiynau i'r Prif Weinidog a'r cwestiwn cyntaf Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Llywydd. What steps is the Welsh Government taking to alleviate road traffic congestion in South Wales Central?
Well, sustainably improving infrastructure and transport links, reducing journey times and increasing transport choice, and focusing on the safety and reliability of the road network are priorities for this government.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. As you'll no doubt be aware, there are major housing developments planned for the edges of Cardiff, which will undoubtedly increase road traffic congestion in the next few years. Of course, we're hopeful that the South Wales Metro will eventually arrive, but in the medium term, are there any steps that the government here could take to alleviate any potential increases in road congestion, which could possibly turn Cardiff into what increasingly road users are saying is a glorified car park?
Well, it's a matter, of course, for the local authority to ensure that when there is a development, that Section 106 is used to its fullest extent, that the community infrastructure levy can be used in order to make sure that infrastructure can be provided where there is development. And I'd expect any local authority in Wales to be able to do that. And of course, the Metro in time will be able to extend its reach to parts of the city and indeed beyond, where there is no heavy rail link and where light rail, for example, would make perfect sense in terms of moving people around.
Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Llywydd. Does the First Minister agree that the completion of the Cross Valley Link Road in Mountain Ash will reduce congestion in this particular part of South Wales Central, and moreover that it will play an important part in assisting the two-way flow of capital and labour in future economic schemes such as the Cardiff Capital Region?
Yes, I do. Transport links are important for two reasons, as the member said. Firstly, to enable people to get to work more quickly, but also to enable investment to flow more easily to communities where investment has been hard to attract in years gone by. So, for me, schemes like the Metro, like the Cross Valley Link are important schemes in ensuring that people and investment can move more freely around.
Neil McAvoy.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, in Europe, 460,000 people die prematurely each year from air pollution. Worldwide, the figure is 6.5 million. In Wales, thousands die every year, and the World Health Organization lists Cardiff as one of the worst areas for air pollution. Now, Labour's plans for Cardiff include putting 10,000 extra cars on the road. So how is this consistent with the goals of the Future Generations Act, taking into account that those 10,000 extra cars will breathe poisonous fumes all over my constituents?
Well, I fully expect, as I said earlier on, that any development should include maximum use of Section 106 agreements of the Community Infrastructure Levy in order to make sure that sustainable transport links are put in place to those developments. It is correct to say that the days when development was driven entirely by the car have come to an end, and it's important that all local authorities in Wales are able to, or do, look at sustainable transport options as development occurs.
David Melding.
First Minister, I'd invite you to walk through Cogan if you want to really experience poor air quality. It's quite astonishingly bad there. I walk through through Cogan quite frequently. It's clear that we need to reduce the number of needless journeys or journeys that are not shared, so just one occupant driving a car. There are many quick wins we can gain, and that ought to be the other half of our active travel strategy. We've got a good law, we need to start to implement it.
Well, firstly, this is a multi-pronged approach. Where there are immense traffic problems that cannot be resolved through public transport, they need to be dealt with. The M4 is such an issue. But we can't rely on car-based transport forever. When the franchise transfers to the Welsh Government, we want to make sure that we have better quality rolling stock on Cardiff suburban lines, the development of the Metro, more light rail in years to come, so that communities that perhaps lost their links years ago to the heavy rail network are reconnected via the light rail network. When it comes to cycling, we are very, very keen to make sure that more cities see cycling not just as a recreation but as a mode of transport. Cardiff has a network of cycle routes. They're not all connected. Other towns and cities don't do so well. It's important for many cyclists that they're not in the same lanes as traffic. Their confidence isn't strong enough for them to do that. So we must do more, of course, through the Active Travel Act, as the member says, to make sure that all modes of sustainable transport are promoted.
Cwestiwn 2, David Ellis Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Pryd y cyfarfu Prif Weinidog Cymru ddiwetha a Prif Weinidog y Deyrnas Unedig I drafod datblygiadau cyfansoddiadol yng Nghymru?
Wel, cwrdd a hi yn y cydbwyllgor Weinidogion ar y bedwerydd ar hugen o Hydref a nath llawer o bethau gael ei drafod pryd hynny.
As y Prif Weinidog nawr sicrhau'r cynulliad cenedlaethol yma na fydd na unrhyw leihad yn ei rym cyfreithiol oherwydd yr eithriadau I Fil Cymru, y broses Brexit fel ei gelwir, na chwaith cwestiynau anghyfansoddiadol ambell I aelod seneddol cydwadol.
Wel, gael ddweud ynglyn â'r broses o Brexit, mae yna ddoi beth sy'n holl bwysig fan hyn. Yn gynta, dim lleihad mewn pwerau'r sefydliad hyn, ag wrth gwrs, sicrhau bod y pwerau sydd ar hyn o bryd ym Mrwsel yn cael ei drosglwyddo i'r sefydliad hyn ag I bobl Cymru hefyd. A ny'r egwyddorion ni'n parhau I ddilyn trwy'r siarad a trafodaeth trafodaeth ni'n cymryd ymlaen gyda Llywodraeth y Senedd.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Gai dechrau drwy diolch I Prif Weinidog am barhau a trafodaethau rhwng I Blaid Yntau a Plaid Cymru ynglyn â dyfodol cyfansoddiadol Cymru ac yn benodol am y cyfarfod y gawson ni ddoi. I ni'n edrych ymlaen, wrth gwrs, at gweld y gwelliannau fydd gerbon tir y glwyddi ynglyn â Bil Cymru I sicrhau y broses hyn. Ond hoffwn ni godi rhyw mater arall gyda fe heddi, mater sydd yn ymwneud â Senedd arall. Mae Lywydd yn adrodd llywydd Senedd Catalwnia yn wynebu achos llys yn Sbaen am caniatau trafodaeth a dyfodol cyfansoddiad Catalwnia. Hynny yw caniatau trafodaeth yn Senedd Catalwnia am annibyniaeth. Nawr, ni gyd yn gwybod bod Sbaen yn sensitif iawn ynglyn â cwestiwn annibyniaeth. Ond mewn gwlad democrataeth, fel ni wedi gweld yn yr Alban ac fel ni gweld fan hyn yng Nghymru hefyd, mae trafodaeth am dyfodol cenedl yn holl bwysig I ddangos bod cenedl yn gallu symud ar y broses yna gam wrth gam gyda'i gilydd. Fyddwch chi felly yn gallu codi materion hyn gyda Llywodraeth San Steffan gan mynegu pryder bod llywydd Senedd yn gwynebu achos llys am caniatau drafodaeth mewn Senedd.
Wel, gai ystyried hwnna yn mwy fanwl, a na fi'n neud hynny, ysgrifennu i'r aelod ynglyn ar manylion. Wy'n gwybod bod y sefyllfa yn wahanol yn Sbaen. Pan es I Catalwnia, I gwrdd ag arlywydd Catalwnia ar y pryd, un o'r cwestiynau cafodd I ofyn I fi yng nghenhadledd y wasg oedd a o'n I wedi cael caniatad David Cameron I dod I Barcelona. Wedi si, wel na, ni wedi cael y caniatad, neu byddwn ni erbyn cael y caniatad, a bydde ddim yn erbyn I fi I ofyn am caniatad ta beth. Ond na beth yw'r cyd-destun wrth gwrs yng Catalonia, ond gai ystyried y sefyllfa mwy fanwl a wedi sgwennu nôl i'r aelod.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinwyr, y pleidiau arweinydd y ceidwadwyr Cymreig Andrew R.T. Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, before I start my questions, could I wish you the compliments of the season and best wishes to your family over the festive period and best wishes for the new year in particular as well then. Last week we had the really good news about Tata Steel and the announcement of the agreement that seemed to have been reached between the unions and the company. And bear in mind where we were this time last year with 700 job losses announced and then the devastating news in March that many of us in this chamber engaged with and right the way through the election process, it was looking rather bleak. It's unimaginable to be in the positive territory we're in at the moment. But there is an important caveat that the deal has to be ratified by the workers around the pension pot and the pension arrangements going forward. Are you confident that that is a deal that should be endorsed by the workers when they're balloted on it?
Well, could I first of all reciprocate and wish him the season's greetings as well, of course. He raises an important issue about Tata. Tata would not be in the position that it's in at the moment in Wales if it wasn't for the help that we've given. I'd like to pay tribute to not just the financial help, the £60 million package, but also the hard work put in by officials of the Welsh Government. Many meetings. I've spoken to Tata many times, both here and in Mumbai. And in fairness to Tata, they're a company that listens. They are prepared, if you put up the right case, to listen and to move forward. And last week's announcement illustrated that. It's a matter, of course, for the workforce as to what they do, but if I can put it this way, it is unclear what the future would be. if the deal wasn't accepted. These are difficult times, and I think the emphasis has to be on continuing steel production in Wales, and there will be some difficult decisions around that, I understand. Nevertheless, that has to be the main objective.
I do want to push you on this, First Minister, because I do think it's important to get a signal from you of endorsement of that deal. And on the response to my first question, you clearly haven't given that endorsement. Rightly, you've pointed to the support that Welsh Government have given and the UK Government has given as well, and also the change of direction from the Tata main board of Rian Tata coming back in and assuming the reins at that company. And I think that's an important development in the direction of Tata and the way it looks at steel, because the takeover of Corus was very much his takeover. But it is important that you occupy a role here in Wales as the most senior elected politician as First Minister. That deal is on the table. It's a relatively simple question. Do you endorse the deal that's on the table for the workers to vote on?
Endorse the deal. I think it's a very good deal compared particularly to where we were in the spring, when the situation was particularly bleak for steel, the heavy-end steel making in Port Talbot. It is a tribute to all the hard work that's been put in by many, many people that we are in a situation now where Port Talbot particularly can look forward. And certainly, I think this deal is a deal that I can certainly endorse, and a deal that can provide a future for the plant.
And thank you for that unequivocal endorsement of the deal. I think that's important to be on the record. As I said, it is the final piece of the jigsaw that does need to the agreement of the workers going forward. But what was important as well in the negotiations were the issues around business rates. And again, I appreciate the comments that you've made on that. That's a very complex area, and that the government were going to engage in discussions with the European Union to see whether there was a possibility of bringing forward a more favourable business rates regime for the Tata operation, which obviously pays business rates to the tune of about £12 million. And this was a direct request to the Welsh Government as to whether it could actually help. But also on business rates, I had hoped that today we might have had an announcement more generally on business rates here in Wales as to maybe an early Christmas present for businesses around business rate relief that have filled postbags of Assembly members across this chamber. Are you able to say whether the government will be coming forward with an enhanced transitional relief programme for businesses here in Wales who have found themselves on the wrong end of the valuations that have gone out before Christmas? Because once we get the other side of Christmas, many of those businesses are going to be in a very, very difficult place. So we'd be grateful to get some clarity as to whether the government are coming forward with an announcement to assist those businesses.
Well, this is something that we've been considering as part of the final budget, and an announcement will be made very soon in relation to that. In relation to business rates at Tata, well, the package we put on the table is 60 million. It's equivalent effectively of 5 years free business rates. It goes beyond what we could have offered in business rates in any event. Of course, it's very difficult to offer a business rate relief for one particular business in one particular sector without others asking why they shouldn't have the same thing. So what we have is a package of support that is state aid proof, but is targeted particularly at Tata. I have to say it is important now the UK government doesn't lose sight of the fact that not just Tata but many other industries are saying that energy prices are too high in the UK. And so energy intensive industries will need to see more done in order to help them. We cannot afford to be seen as an economy where we are uncompetitive because of the price of energy. Our energy mix is very similar to many, many other countries in Europe. But because of the obscure nature of what alleges to be an energy market in the UK, it does make the UK more expensive, and more work needs to be done by the UK government in that regard as well.
Arweinydd grŵp UKIP, Neil Hamilton.
Diolch. At the end of the year, it's time when we can look back the last 12 months on what we've achieved or not, as the case may be. And I wonder if the First Minister can, in all candour, tell us today what he thinks the greatest failure of his government has been. Would it be in schools, where the PISA results have shown that Wales is ranked worst in the UK yet again? Would it be in the health service, where half our health boards are either in special measures or targeted intervention? Or would it be more widely in poverty in Wales, because having been second from the bottom of the income table of the nations and regions of the United Kingdom when Labour came to power nearly 20 years ago, now we are actually at the bottom of the heap?
Well, we have seen household poverty decrease in Wales, actually. We just had the latest figures, the first time in many, many years. We see what happens with social care in England and the crisis that exists there, and we've seen health spending in Wales increase over the years. We've seen the same with education. But he asks me a fair question, and I'll give him a fair answer. What is the greatest failure? The greatest failure, as far as this government is concerned, is to see him opposite me asking questions in this chamber.
Well, I'm grateful for the compliment, even though it's only implied. But as regards education, the PISA report says that 21% of students at the age of 15 can't read well enough to participate effectively and productively in life. The 23% can't solve problems routinely faced by adults in their daily lives because they can't count. And this is the fourth set of PISA results in which Wales has performed worse than anywhere else in the United Kingdom. Only Wales and Scotland, Wales and Scotland are the only parts of the UK to have gone backwards in the last decade. Isn't that the real failure of his government?
True if you compare the figures over the last 3 years, though we know there are challenges. And I remind the Leader of UKIP what the OECD have said, and that is that Wales is on the right track, that we should stay with what we are doing, that we're going in the right direction and we will see improvements in the future. We're seeing it with GCSE results, we're seeing it with A-level results. What the OECD have said is that they would not be supportive of selective education. I know that's a major policy plank for his party, but OECD don't support that. They see that as making it even more difficult for children from poorer backgrounds to succeed in education. They don't support the policy that he advocates.
Well, we'll return to this, no doubt, in due course, but without wishing to spoil the genial asperity of our weekly exchanges, can I compliment him on the style and finesse, the skill and dexterity with which he occasionally answers my questions and more often swerves around them. And to say that after many years in a similar position in politics, he compares very well with all the opponents that I've had across the dispatch box. And I wish him all the best for the next year. And I hope his government is more successful than it has been in the last.
He has, through those words, probably undermined my position amongst my own group more than any other over the past few months and years. But I'll take his words at face value and wish him the compliments of the season as well. And of course, I'm sure that all members look forward to us crossing swords in this chamber for many, many months and years to come.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, can you tell us the difference between yourself and your UK Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, on immigration policy and specifically relating to the question of the free movement of people?
Yes, I think I'm closer to her position as leader of Plaid Cymru actually than any other. She and I said something very similar last week, namely that there should be freedom of movement for work. She made the point, freedom of movement to look for work within a certain amount of time. I think there's merit in that. In fact, it's what the European regulations actually say. If you look at them with the strictest interpretations. I don't believe that she and I are in a very different position when it comes to freedom of movement.
Well, it seems to me that there's very little difference between yourself and your own party leader on immigration either. And it's quite heartwarming to see the Labour Party actually united on something for once. But actually you said last week that there is a difference between yourself and your leader, when he said that he would not play the numbers game or fan the flames on immigration. Yet your comments on immigration on the 9th of December suggested that there was a split or major disagreement with your leader, and you made out that you were on a different page to him, that you were somehow tougher on the question of immigration than he is. Now, First Minister, only 2.6% of the entire Welsh population come from other European countries. That's 79,000 people. You know that Wales has a low proportion of EU migrants compared to other parts of the UK. Now, you've interpreted your leader's view on immigration as playing into the hands of UKIP. But by implying there isn't really much of an immigration problem here in Wales, it's you that is dancing to UKIP's tune. You will know, as well as I do, that Welsh communities need to attract and retain people to work hard and to generate tax revenue in this country, that we need workers from overseas in our health service and some sectors of the economy. So why are you making out that we don't? First Minister, can we now move on from perceptions and have an honest debate about immigration, public services and the economy here in Wales.
I'm surprised because, as I said earlier on, she and I have said almost exactly the same thing when it comes to the issue of freedom of movement. What she says is perfectly correct. Of course we're reliant on workers from abroad to fill so many vacancies in the Welsh economy. That said, neither she nor I don't think, can deny that the issue of immigration loomed large in the referendum. It was perception. It was perception rather than reality. That much is true, given the numbers. And so, from my perspective, I don't think we can, I don't believe that we can say that the current system gets the widest support that it should. So we have to look at alternatives. Now, she has made the point, and I've made the point, that there can be a modification of that system where there's a freedom to move to a job, or freedom to look for work in specific circumstances. I think that's reasonable. I think the majority of the people of Wales would think that's reasonable. And I would think they would see that as a system of freedom of movement that they could support. I really don't see there's much between us.
First Minister, you should be dealing in realities and not perceptions. You shouldn't be playing along with the myths, okay? Now, we need to have this honest debate on immigration. You shouldn't be implying that we've got a problem when we don't have a problem. There is a migration issue in Wales. We have a problem of emigration. Too many younger and skilled workers are leaving this country, and there's also an imbalance within Wales with jobs and prosperity not spread evenly throughout this country. We've got no problem in attracting people here to retire, and those people remain welcome here. But overall, we are facing a situation where our working age population is set to decrease in the coming years, while the retired population will increase. And as well as impacting upon Welsh communities, the Welsh language, the overall situation simply is not sustainable. That's why Plaid Cymru put forward the policy that we did on higher education during that last election to deal with the problem of emigration. In terms of solutions from Labour, you've offered nothing except to fuel this myth on overseas immigration, internal rows with your Labour leader in order to deflect from your own policy weaknesses. First Minister, instead of pandering to UKIP, when are we going to have a real debate about the real solutions, about the real migration problem here in Wales?
Well, I regret the fact the Leader of Plaid Cymru didn't listen to the answers that I was giving her. Answers that I thought were reasonable and not in any way hostile.
What's the difference between
and now she shouts.
What's the difference?
The point that I've made is that she and I are not very far away, but she must understand, and I know she understands, that perception is important. And where people believe something to be true, it's hugely important to make sure that they see what the reality is. But that was the problem in the referendum in June. People's perception was stronger, and she's right to say, than the reality of the situation. Now, she and I have both suggested a modification of the current freedom of movement rules. Very close in that regard. I think that there are sensible ways forward here that don't let loose the jackals of racism and don't let loose a system of politics that seeks to blame others for economic ills. Now, she makes the point about the economy. Our employment is very low, lower than England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's true to say there are some communities that have moved further ahead than others in terms of economic development. And yet we see towns like Merthyr. Merthyr's doing very well, where there were great difficulties for many, many years after the 1980s. And we know full well that it's important to attract investment into as many communities as possible. That's why, of course, we have Tenneco and General Dynamics in Merthyr, TVR coming to Ebble Vale. These are all significant investment projects that 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago wouldn't have come to Wales, but we've been working hard to make sure that that happens. We know that Wales is an attractive place to come and live, an attractive place to come and work, and a welcoming place. And we will continue to be an open and welcoming country, whilst considering, of course, how we can make sure that the concerns of some about freedom of movement are addressed, but addressed in a sensible, rational and fair way.
Question 3, Mike Hedges.
Presiding Officer, will the First Minister make a statement on progress being made towards achieving the Welsh Housing Quality Standard?
Well, all social landlords, including Swansea Council, are on track to meet the standard by 2020. The latest annual statistics show that in March of this year, 79% of existing social homes now meet the standard. It's an 8-point rise over the course of the year, and nearly 18,000 households now live in better quality homes than in the previous year.
Thank you, First Minister. Can I congratulate the Welsh Government on the success of reaching the Welsh housing quality standard? And can I also say an example of an ambitious target which has been financially supported, which has improved the lives of many, many people, including many of my constituents. But can the money currently allocated to upgrading council properties, when all have met the Welsh housing quality standard, be allocated for building of new council properties?
Well, yes, we're very keen to make sure that more councils are able to build council houses, and we're interested, of course, in looking at every innovative way to increase housing supply. The 20,000 affordable homes target includes local authority on lending to housing associations to enable them to develop. The advantage of that, of course, is that the local authority can borrow from the Public Works Loan Board at a lower rate than will be available from traditional lenders. There are examples of partnership between local authorities and housing associations as well. And we've moved a long way from the day when local authorities couldn't build council houses. It's important that local authorities are able to provide for their populations, and importantly, that the accommodation that's provided is of the best standard possible.
Bethan Jenkins.
Diolch. Does neb yn tanseilio'r ffaith bod safon ansawdd tai Cymru yn un uchelgeisiol a byddwn ni'n cefnogol o hynny, ond dyn ni fel aelodau cynulliad yn barhau I gael nifer fawr o gwynion am gwasanaethau tai cymdeithasol, enghraifft bod gwaith ddim yn cael ei gwneud ar amser, fod diffyg ymateb gan rhai o'r gwasanaethau tai ynghyd-dest yn y ffaith bod yn amser gaeafol a bod pobl yn aros am amser hir I gweithfeydd cael ei gwneud. A oes unrhyw fath o holiadur ydych chi wedi gwneud fel Llywodraeth mwyn sicrhau fod pob cymdeithas tai yn gweithio yn effeithlon mwyn sicrhau fod pobl yn fwy hapus gyda'r gwasanaethau maen nhw'n derbyn yn y maes hyn?
Wrth gwrs, fel Llywodraeth, ni'n erbyn I gyfreithasau tai sicrhau nid dim ond bod nhw'n adeiladu, ond bod nhw'n cynnal tai hefyd, a sicrhau bod tai mewn cyflwr da. Nawr gan y man, mae yna gwynion yn dod, fi'n cael yr un peth wrth gwrs, mae hi, ac wrth gwrs mae gwynion hynny mewn rhofiad I yn cael ei ddelio mewn ffordd sy'n eitha cyflym. Ond na, ni'n erbyn wrth gwrs bod y safon yn cael I sicrhau pan mae tai yn cael ei adeiladu ag wrth gwrs pan mae tai yn cael ei cynnal trwy ystod bywyd y tai hynny.
Mark Ishwood.
Well, in 2012, which was when the standard was supposed to have been achieved by all social landlords, the Wales Order Office said the main shortfall in meeting the standard was in areas where tenants voted against proposals to transfer. Your then Housing Minister subsequently stated that 3 authorities hadn't got realistic business plans and had to resubmit new ones, which were approved by a subsequent minister. Given that the borrowing limits for housing set where, as a part of the agreement to exit the housing revenue account, left an estimated borrowing headroom across all authorities of just 471 million to achieve a Welsh housing quality standard, how can that be achieved to the standard originally intended, with the additional bits about wider community regeneration, when that only leaves estimated borrowing, Wrexham 118 million, that's good, Swansea 74, but Flintshire only £25 million under that headroom established?
Well, we expect the affordable homes target to be met in a variety of ways, whether that's through local authorities, through housing associations, through partnerships, of course, between the two, and other ways to see where it's possible to intervene in the local market to make sure that there's a sufficient supply of housing, particularly in rural areas. All these things are under consideration as we look at innovative ways of dealing with this issue. But what's important as well, of course, is as we make sure that there are more affordable homes available, that we don't see the plug being kept out of the bath at the other end and those homes being sold. You can't possibly reach a target of 20,000 affordable homes if you're selling, if you're building with the one hand and selling with the other, which is why, of course, we're earning the right to buy.
Cwestiwn 4, Jenny Rathbone.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the pace of change needed for transforming rail services?
Well, rail infrastructure has not devolved. Following years of underinvestment, we are taking steps to address this where we can through our procurement of the Wales and Borders franchise and the Metro. But it's true to say the UK Government must do more to invest in Wales or devolve power and funding so that we can.
Given that Network Rail has said that it's going to take 28 years to bring the rail industry up to the standard required in Wales, which seems to me much too long, given in the light of the discourse we had about road congestion earlier on. I'm pleased to hear you mention the importance of light rail in that context. And I just want to looking at the South Wales Metro, I just want to look at how light rail can run much closer together, which means trains can slow down and accelerate much more quickly, which means journey times from, say, Merthyr would be reduced from over an hour to 40 minutes, which is competitive with the car. So I want to have some understanding as to how vehemently the Welsh Government is proceeding with light rail for the South Wales Metro, which seems to me will deliver the outcomes that we want.
Yes, the Metro will be a mixture of light rail, heavy rail and faster bus services. There will be some lines that will be more appropriate for light rail than others. I need to add at this point that I want to be absolutely clear to the trades unions that if we move towards light rail in some valley lines, that is not a reason to cut jobs. In all terms and conditions, we absolutely know that it's hugely important that those who are working on those lines now have the same terms and conditions in the future as they do now. Ken Skates is not Chris Grayling. Don't thank me for that comparison, I don't think, but there we are. And we want to work with the trades unions in that regard. But of course, the advantage of light rail is its ability to extend into parts of not just Cardiff, but other valley communities where heavy rail is not going to go because of cost and because of topography. The Metro that we've foreseen is one where we have a combination of fast transport options that form part of that. We can't wait for Network Rail to get its act together. We've had issues with Network Rail where it's not clear that they actually know what the condition of the asset is or whether there's a proper survey, whether one's been done for 25 years. But we want to make sure that we get on with the Metro to serve our communities as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Dialogue.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you'll be aware of last week's announcement by the UK Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, as you mentioned, with regards to joint management teams for rail franchises, and also that the new Varsity line between Oxford and Cambridge, announced in the autumn statement, will be designed, constructed and run by a new body called East-West Rail, totally separate from Network Rail. So, following that announcement, do you agree there is scope to develop a different model for railway management here in Wales by establishing a Welsh version of East-West Rail, and where funding decisions around railway infrastructure would be made here in Cardiff and not in London? And if so, given recent announcements, will you step up efforts in making the case to the UK government with regards to the devolution of the management of the railway?
I think it's pretty fair to say we've been relentless in that regard. We have 9% of the track. We don't get 9% of the investment. Another issue that we have been pursuing with vigour with the UK government is that the situation that currently exists in the Wales Bill, where it will not be open to the Welsh government to consider a public sector agency to run the railways, but the Scottish government will be able to do that, which is clear discrimination, bluntly, if you want my view on it. So, from our perspective, it would be far easier if the track and the operators were dealt with in the same way, the same organisation. It's too easy for the bodies responsible for the track, Network Rail, and the operators to blame each other when there are problems. Far easier to have an integrated system rather than the fragmented one we have at the moment.
Cwestiwn 5, Steffan Lewis.
Will the First Minister provide an update on efforts to secure a review of the mine workers' pension scheme surplus?
Yes, as I indicated in the Chamber last month, we do acknowledge the need for proper, safe and well-managed arrangements for this pension scheme. Pensions are not devolved, but we have pressed the UK government on this and we continue to do so.
I thank the First Minister for his answer, and it was very pleasing that a few weeks ago the National Assembly unanimously passed a motion calling for a review of the MPS surplus, and also that motion mandated the Welsh Government to build alliances with regional leaders in England and with other devolved governments to put increasing pressure on the UK Government. Can he give assurances that that mandate that he's been provided with by the National Assembly will be furthered in the new year, and that this will be a priority for his government in 2017?
Well, a letter was sent in June of this year to Amber Rudd. We were in contact with UK government officials this morning. Their position is essentially unchanged. The difficulty is that the trustees haven't raised any issues with the UK government about wishing to change the current process. So there will be a need to ensure that the trustees are happy with any changes, as well as, of course, the UK government.
Rhiannon Passmore.
First Minister, the Welsh Government has consistently supported the National Union of Mine Workers' call for the surplus to be put back in the scheme for the benefit of the retired miners and coal industry workers. Mr Ken Sullivan, who has collected a petition with 8,000 names from my constituency, worked in Oakdale Colliery near Blackwood for 24 years. And the people of Islwyn, like my grandfather and my great-uncle, as so many in the South Wales valleys, worked in hard and dangerous conditions, often to the detriment of their health. What further representations, then, can the Welsh Government make to the UK Tory Government in denial for them to play fair with Welsh miners?
Well, there is a duty, I believe, on the trustees to make sure that they explain to the pension scheme's members exactly what they are doing, so that members of the scheme feel content and feel that the scheme is treating them fairly. So there is an emphasis on them to do that, but we will, of course, continue to press the issue with the UK Government, as we have been doing since June, at the very least.
Nick Ramsey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And Stefan was right when he said that the whole Assembly in that debate has backed the Welsh Government's position on this. It is important that the former mine workers' pensions are protected and that there are arrangements with the UK Government which are transparent and fair. What discussions have you had with the UK Government regarding the need for them to continue to guarantee the pension fund? And with regard to the surplus, it does look as though the surplus sharing arrangements have benefited the government more than they have the mine workers over the last few years. So what discussions have you had on this, and have you made clear that this isn't just the Welsh Government speaking, this is the National Assembly as a whole which is making these points?
Well, those inquiries were made this morning. As I've said, the UK Government has taken note of the view of this National Assembly. The particular arrangements that revolve around the pension scheme mean that, yes, indeed, it's right to say the UK Government does get the benefit of any periodic surplus in the scheme funds, and we have made the point that we believe that that surplus should be recycled back into the scheme for the benefit of its members rather than to the UK Government.
Cwestiwn 6, Hugh Ranker-Davies.
What recent discussions has the Welsh Government had with the UK Government regarding the Heathrow rail link or spur?
Well, international connectivity via Heathrow is important to Wales's economy. And in early 2016, Network Rail consulted on plans to improve rail links to Heathrow. In response to this consultation, we welcomed the journey time reductions the proposed rail link would offer.
I thank the First Minister for that answer, and as he knows, the Reading Heathrow rail link will hugely improve access to Heathrow Airport for leisure and business travellers from South Wales and the South West and the West Midlands and many other areas. It will reduce travel times by down to around 26 minutes, reduce carbon and transport more people onto the rail and away from private transport. But it's also true that 1.3 million people have jobs with a foreign-owned firm which are facilitated through travel through Heathrow, and 8.8% of those live in Wales. It's the biggest proportion of any part of the UK. So, in future discussions with the Prime Minister, but also the Secretary of State for Transport and the UK Government, could he ram home the importance of this rail link? Regardless of Heathrow capacity expansion, this rail link, this spur, could deliver for people, for Wales, in very short order. We understand that the decision is going to be made sometime in early 2019. Let's make it the right decision, because bold government is good government, as we have shown with Cardiff Airport.
Well, indeed, I mean, Heathrow is by far the busiest airport in the UK. It will continue to be that way. Its geography demands that it would be that way. Gatwick is just too far from most communities in the UK to get to the same level as Heathrow. But it's hugely important that, building on the theme from earlier on, that people feel that there are viable and seamless public transport options for them, rather than getting off in Reading and onto the rail air coach in Reading. Hugely important that people can get into Heathrow Airport in the most seamless way possible, and that will encourage more people out of their cars, and of course will help congestion around the airport.
Russell George.
The expansion of Heathrow Airport is undoubtedly a major boost for trade and tourism in Wales. Now, in contrast to the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government seems to have failed to attract much of a positive boost for Wales in return for the Welsh Government support for the expansion. In a memorandum of understanding to the Scottish Government, the Scottish Government secured 16,000 new jobs, 200 million construction-related spend in Scotland, 10 million route development fund, and landing charge discounts. Now, do you regret not securing a similar memorandum of understanding as your Scottish counterparts managed to achieve?
We looked at the memorandum. We're not sure exactly what it delivers, actually. There are words in it, but in terms of actions, it's not clear at all. I mean, it's not possible in terms of procurement to designate a certain amount of money for procurement to Scottish firms. That goes straight against the procurement rules. So it's not entirely clear what it means. From our perspective, however, we have been working for some time with Heathrow Airport on reaching agreement on a statement of intent that will look at things like the supply chain, like transport, like aviation and marketing opportunities as well. The issue of landing slots is not particularly relevant to us. It is much more relevant in Scotland, that's true, but what we're exploring is the opportunity to market Wales better in Heathrow, which emphasising the point, of course, that South Wales in particular is very close to Heathrow Airport and it can be a major gateway for tourism.
Cwestiwn 7, Janet Finch-Saunders.
Will the First Minister make a statement on rheumatology services in Wales?
Yes, through the Development Directive for Arthritis and Chronic Musculoskeletal Conditions, we continue to raise awareness and support people to reduce their risk of these conditions, and where they do occur, to assess, diagnose and provide ongoing care locally and as quickly as possible.
Thank you. First Minister, the Rheumatology in Wales, the State of Play report, has found that referrals for diagnosis to rheumatology departments has now increased by 66% since 2012. Yet, just 22% of patients diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis were seen by a specialist within 3 weeks. 35% found it difficult to get any appointment, and 20% have waited over 2 years to begin treatment. A significant number have now resorted to paying for a private consultant for diagnosis as a result of NHS waiting times in Wales. What immediate action will you now be taking to ensure that your health service complies with NICE guidance and that arthritis sufferers in Wales are no longer let down by this Welsh Labour government?
Well, I have to say, in 2015 to 16, where there is the latest available data, there were just under 94,000 rheumatology outpatient attendances across Wales. 24,800 were new attendances, the remaining were follow-ups. 2,300 outpatients didn't attend their appointment, which is never obviously helpful in terms of being able to organise the service. At the end of October, there were 14 people waiting over 36 weeks for an appointment. Of these, 2 were waiting for a first outpatient appointment, both in Cardiff and the Vale. So yes, some people, it's true to say, from those figures, have waited longer than we would want, but the vast majority of people get seen as quickly as possible. Bear in mind, of course, that rheumatoid arthritis is not that easy to diagnose. There are many other conditions that GPs will tend to look at first before looking at rheumatoid arthritis, before the blood tests are then conducted looking at the, I think it's called the rheumatoid factor as far as rheumatoid arthritis is concerned. So it's not that easy to diagnose as a condition, but we want to make sure that GPs are more aware, of course, of the need to refer, and ultimately, of course, that people get treatment as quick. Well, first of all, diagnosis, because the earlier the diagnosis, the better for rheumatoid arthritis, and ultimately, of course, the right level of treatment for them.
Rhina Piorwerth.
Wydd yn aml iawn, mae pobl yn cysylltu cryd y cymalau efo pobl hŷn, ond wrth gwrs mae o yn rhywbeth sy'n gallu taro pobl o bob oed. Cymru ydy'r unig wlad yn y Deyrnas Unedig sydd heb wasanaeth pediatrig ar gyfer rheumatolog, bod cleifion o'r gogledd yn gallu cael triniaeth yn ysbyty Oldehei yn Lerpwl. Ydy'r Prif Weinidog yn credu y dyle Cymru allu cynnig gwasanaeth rheumatolog pediatrig?
Mi'n wir i weid, allif gwnegon rheumatoid taro unrhyw oedran. Nid rhywbeth i wneud â pethau ymwerol lawr yw rheumatoid arthritis, ond rhywbeth sydd y corff yn ymosod ar ei hunan yw autoimmune disease felly yw e. Na, mae rhaid fod yn ofalus yw fan hyn. Dwi ddim moyn gweld bobl yn goffod dod o Ynys Môn yn enghraifft i Gaerdydd i ganolfan y genedlaethol. So felly mae Daearyddiaeth Cymru yn dweud fi bod e'n bwysig bod bobl i gallu cael triniaeth mor agos as sy'n bosib wedi cartrefi nhw.
Caroline Jones.
I apologise for a similar question, but First Minister, with around 400,000 children living in South Wales, the fact that the region is still without a dedicated multidisciplinary paediatric rheumatology service is shocking. Currently, services are being provided part-time by an adult rheumatologist, but there is no formal clinical network or adequate multidisciplinary input. What plans does the government have to establish a tertiary paediatric rheumatology service in South Wales?
Much it depends, of course, on the throughput of patients as to whether a unit could be specialised enough. It's the old question we always face to be effective. But what I'll do, both as far as the member for Ynys is concerned and the regional member, is to write with further details about paediatric rheumatology to explain why the situation is as it is.
Question 8, Mohammed Ashka.
Madam Presiding Officer, how will the policy contained Welsh Government's Taking Wales Forward programme contribute to alleviating persistent poverty in Wales, please?
Well, job creation, closing the education attainment gap and improving skill levels are our key priorities, and they represent the most effective levers at our disposal to tackle poverty in Wales.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. I recently visited the Jamia Mosque, Newport, which is the largest in Wales at the moment, with the Director of Princess Trust Cymru, Mr. Philip Jones, to raise awareness of the work the Trust does to help young people in most deprived communities to fulfill their potential in their lives. Since your government is phasing out the Community First program, will you advise this Assembly what consideration you are giving to using the programs of organizations like the Princess Trust Cymru, which has a proven track record of a great success in alleviating persistent poverty in Wales, in meeting Wales government anti-poverty objectives?
Well, I mean, we're looking at new ways of working with organisations who have proven experience on the ground without losing, of course, the expertise that already has been built up over the years through Communities First. It's heartening to see that the number of households in poverty has dropped in Wales, the first time for some time. That is an indication that what we are doing in terms of enabling people to have the skills that they need for the future, in terms of attracting investment into Wales, are beginning to bear fruit.
And now, Don Bowden.
Diolch, Llywydd. And will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's strategy to promote tourism in Wales?
Well, it's now 3 years since the launch of the Strategy for Tourism, 2013 to 2020. That sets a target of 10% growth in real terms in respect of overnight visitor expenditure in Wales by 2020, and we are on track to exceed that growth target.
Thank you, First Minister, for that answer. Every opportunity that I have, I try to take to promote the benefits of tourism in Merthyr Tydfil and Rumney, particularly around our rich industrial and social history. And I've been looking into improving signposting to some of the many attractions that the area has to offer. However, my inquiries have revealed that since August 2013, any tourist destination located further than 10 miles from a motorway or a grade-separated dual carriageway is not eligible for tourism brown signs, signage that predates that are left unaffected. Now, I recognise that there is a need to manage any proliferation of signs, but it does seem illogical to me that those attractions which are not immediately off the main highway into South Wales, i.e. the M4, which could benefit most from promotional signage, are not included, whereas those which are signed already enjoy the advantage of being located near the highway, i.e. within 10 miles. So could I ask the First Minister to look into the possibility of revised criteria which would allow greater flexibility over the location of tourism signage so that areas like Merthyr Tydfil and Rumney are not further disadvantaged because they are more than 10 miles away from the nearest motorway link?
Well, in relation to signing, it's not just the motorways, but trunk roads. For example, destinations up to 6 miles from a single carriageway or 10 miles from a grade-separated dual carriageway or motorway may be eligible for tourism signing. Now, the A470 and the A465 are both trunk roads, and so it's perfectly possible that they are included in the criteria. I can say that we do encourage local authorities, and we'd encourage Merthyr to apply to get signage for tourism attractions, and that offer, of course, is still